This is the season 2 premiere of Off the Lot, but how we're going to structure the show for the next few weeks is a weekly check-in with viewers and listeners to take you through the making of Remnant. Hello and welcome to Off the Lot. The film industry is changing fast, and if you want to make movies, it's time to become your own gatekeeper. If you've got a vision and the drive to make it happen, this podcast is for you.
We're your hosts, Ken Kabatoff and Anthony Yap, and every week we dive into the hustle, challenges, and strategies of independent filmmaking. We talk to directors, producers, and industry pros about what it really takes to get your film made on your own terms.
Let's dive in. Look at us, we're back. Off the Lot again, season 2. Hopefully it's just like riding a bike. It's good to see you, Anthony.
It's very good to see you, Ken, and to hear you.
Right, because like even between seasons, we didn't actually talk very much. We were both just so busy doing our thing. And so I genuinely don't know a lot of the things that you got up to, but even outside of work, did you have a good off season? What did you get up to?
Since the last episode, we finished off the production of Blue Box. And then for basically October, November, December, other than being part of the post-production and wrapping things up, it was nice and relaxing being able to get back into regular routines, if you will, of getting back into, exercise and things like that. And then we did go to Whistler Film Festival for this year, which was probably the only film related thing we did over the last couple of months. We happened to be one of the films that we had assistant directed on, which was called Starwalker, was playing there. And so that happened to also be playing at the Whistler Film Festival.
Oh, so that's really cool. I haven't been to the Whistler Film Fest. What's it like?
It's fun. We haven't been in a long time, but this year we sort of had an incentive to go, and it's a fun little place. I like the fact that it feels very much the way that I envision something like a Sundance would feel like, where everything's in the village. You go to a pub or something, and you're bound to run into someone in the film industry. Yeah. And so sometimes it's people you know, sometimes it's people you don't. I ran into Bob from Pellplat there, and
great.
And
we love Bob.
We had a couple of people he was chatting with, a couple of former VFS students, and I had a couple of meetings with other producers where we were just kind of talking about going to some sessions and what was being taught at some of these sessions and so on the landscape of film production in Canada, but also just, what's the landscape for the future of movies and having those pie in the sky projections of, well, what's the state of the industry? And of course, there's always these people who have their doom and gloom predictions. And then there's these people who say, well, we're maybe entering the new golden era of independent film, which I think is actually more a better way to look at it, is that we actually have there's so much more opportunity now, I think, in the world of independent film. And it's nice to talk with people who are seeing that the same way, even though very few of us have a concrete pathway as to how that will work. It's nice to still sit around and go, okay, well, for it to work this way, we all have to do this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm an optimist in this regard, although I completely agree with the doom and gloomers that it is very doom and gloom on the Hollywood side of things right now. I mean, with Warner Brothers being sold off to Netflix, and I know tons of executive friends that are out of work and writer friends in Hollywood that are working in the studio system. It's not great right now. However, it's not to say that indie right now is thriving, but I think it will be soon. And by soon, I mean, in the next 5 years. I was thinking there's kind of this like end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s kind of vibe of, end of the 60s, the studios are going bankrupt and Easy Riders, starts coming out. That comes out, end of the 60s. And then that was the birth of Scorsese and Spielberg and like George Lucas and Coppola and Brian De Palma and all of these amazing independent filmmakers that I kind of feel like that's where we are. I don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but there's just that energy, I think, in the indie community in a way.
Very much. The problem, and I think you're hitting it, is those whose livelihoods and those who have built careers around the old school traditional Hollywood and studio system are probably the ones who are suffering.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are feeling it more because they're not seeing, well, first of all, they're not seeing the work, but they're also probably not seeing the money isn't what it was. The offers aren't coming the way that they used to. And there's just an oversupply of people for a very limited supply of jobs.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think in writing departments, it's probably very, very prevalent. I'm not sure if that's what you're seeing as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are fewer things being made, and on those things, let's just assume they're TV shows, there are just fewer opportunities for writers on those shows. So, of course, a lot of people are out of work. Hollywood is so risk averse, and it's taking forever to get anything off the ground. It's kind of a miracle right now. I recently started following this Hollywood writer who has he's a bunch of his films have been produced. And his name is Colby Day. He has a newsletter called Holly Weird, and he's very funny, and he's great and very, very smart guy. But he recently put out a newsletter about how his 2025 went, and one of the big takeaways for him was that he just waited around too long in 2025. We have to wait for this. We have to wait for this person to do this. Maybe we should wait a little bit before taking this out. This is what you hear from your agents all the time. Let's just wait a little bit. This isn't a good time. It's never a good time. It's never a good time. And so his big mantra for 2026 is, I'm going to be more pushy. I'm tired of waiting. And frankly, that's my approach to things, and that's what I was doing all of last year. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's about taking control of your own career, not waiting for permission. The things that we always talk about on this podcast, about just take agency for yourself, right? And go out there and just get it done, and do what you have to find the money, knock down those doors, and get the movie made.
Yeah, and I think as a writer, it become that agency is really important, because I think if you were a writer, you have to assume that you're essentially the producer of your own career. You cannot just write scripts and hope that people are going to find them and buy them, and so on. You have to make a name with your own stories. You have to write stories you can make yourself, or write stories that you and your friends can make together. Your little cohort of people can do, in order to get that notice out there, because there's still 1,000 scripts probably being written, and there's still 1,000 screenwriters who are writing scripts all the time. So I don't think that has changed in the number of people. It's just changed in what can be produced, and what studios are willing to put money into. I just don't think there's money out there that says, oh, we're here, we're gonna put money into new development of new writers and new writing opportunities and new scripts and so on. I think it's gonna have to be self-initiated. You're gonna have to find your way through, and if you get noticed that way, that's probably the way to get a job. But if you're looking at this as a way of just getting work and not having to worry about that entrepreneurial side of things, I think you're going to find yourself at the bottom of the barrel.
Well, yeah, and to that point, that's why in between seasons of Off the Lot, and one of the things that I've been up to lately is I started a weekly newsletter that's also going to track what I'm working on, but it's called the Film Founder. And the reason why it's called that is because you can't just think like a writer anymore, or a director, or just a producer. You have to be entrepreneurial. You have to think like a founder, and you have to really think about how a movie is built, or an indie TV show, or whatever you're working on, a vertical drama. But how can you take the reins and do this yourself? And so with my weekly newsletter, I'm going to take people through this production that I'm on, and how we put it together ourselves, and what goes into it, the challenges, the triumphs, and all of that. What I did last year was I just changed the way that I thought about this industry, as far as, oh, I'm just a writer, and I'm going to write a script and give it to my agent, and then Steven Spielberg is going to give me a job based on that script. And that's just not how it works anymore. It's just about taking control, doing it yourself, figuring it out. And it's tough, and not everybody can do it, and not everybody's in a position to do it. And I recognize that, especially if you've been, a journeyman director or writer, or, working in Hollywood for 40 years. The last thing you want to hear right now is like, well, just go and make $100,000 movie.
In a weird way, I think that's probably symptomatic of what LA is going through as well, where after the fires last year and after all of that stuff, where people were so displaced, the industry existing in one sort of central geographical location, I think we might be seeing that as a relic.
Yeah.
And it might be a thing where you don't need to be geographically located anywhere specifically in order to build a film career, as long as you can find a way to access what you need in order to make a film or write a film. I mean, you don't need anything to write a script. You just need a place to do it. And you notice that from a lot of films. Like I've seen some really good foreign films lately that I think are showing that, when I watch them, I'm like, well, this was written, nobody there's not, this was written by people not in any kind of a central hub of filmmaking. They got the right people involved, of course. I mean, then I think that it still holds true that you have to go out there and meet people, but I don't think that you don't have to be in LA for that, and you don't have to be in Vancouver for that, or Toronto, or any of those
Yeah.
places. I think you just need to find your niche and find your pathway through to stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we talk about making movies, since that's sort of where
Let's
we're
do it.
going with this anyway. And so over the last few months, let's see, we wrapped up the first season of Off the Lot in August. You were in pre-production at the time on a film called Blue Box that you were
Yep.
producing. And
Yep.
so, now that it's all over, you're in post-production. Take us through it. What is this film? What is it about? Let's dive into the making of this. And I'd love to just hear, your perspective as a producer on putting together this multi-million dollar film.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll caveat this by saying that there are some things that we cannot talk about, only because we just like all films, you have non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements. But there's
For
definitely
sure.
some high level things that I can get into that would be public anyway. And yeah, so we wrapped up pre-production in August, and we went on a 4-week journey of making a film in BC that was Spanish language, made to look like Argentina. And
Okay. And it was produced, this was also, was it Amazon? Or how was it total indie? Or can you talk about
it's a
that at all?
licensed to Amazon Latin America. It's an independent production in that it's not commissioned. Like, it's not, Amazon isn't. They're
We're not
the
producing it.
broadcast partner, but they're not producing it. Yeah, so I mean, effectively a bit of an indie film with a little more involvement from, like, a little higher level involvement from producers, but not
Mhm.
what I would call like studio intervention. And we definitely didn't have this sort of the studio reporting requirements that you would have if you worked for Warner Brothers or anything like
Sure.
that.
So still independent that way. How many days of pre-production did you have?
We did 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks of full pre-production,
Okay. And 4 weeks of shooting?
4 weeks of shooting. I would say that we had we had an extra month of sort of what I would call soft prep, where we were getting just getting pieces together, getting kind of the keys involved and things like that, and then we went into a full pre-production in July, and then we started filming the middle of August. So we didn't start filming on a Monday. We basically started filming on the Thursday, and then we filmed all the way throughout.
You were
And
still
it
working on a
was,
Monday to Friday work week, though?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We
Yeah.
we we sort of we did Thursday, Friday, then took the weekend, and then had Monday to Friday as well. And then we had Labor Day in there as well, so there was an extra day off in between too. So
Yeah.
we didn't have all we had a 4-day week that week, and so on. So we kind of worked, those Monday to Friday, had quite a few overnights, 4 overnights I think we had.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which for those out there, it's sort of, we did Thursdays and Fridays. What you always try to do with your productions, especially in the indie world, is you try to build towards starting earlier in the day on the Monday, and then by the end of the week you're building into the evenings, so that you can allow for what we call turnaround and rest and so on in between shoot days. So we had Thursday and Friday. I think our second week we did basically an overnight shoot. So starting at when the sun went down, and wrapping
Mhm.
when the sun comes up the next day, which is always interesting, because I think if you haven't, I don't know, if you haven't been through that, it's kind of fun, because you get into there's a bit of a fugue state people get into as a crew
Totally.
when you start shifting, because it's almost like traveling across the world and moving into new time zones every day, because you're trying to reset your sleep schedule in order to meet in order to be awake for the entire day of production, in order to try to have like energy and still be alive at the beginning of production. And then when you finish at the end of the week, you're resetting back to kind of normal, Vancouver Pacific time zone. I always lament when people start arguing about getting rid of daylight savings time, and I think to myself, well, I mean, it's we shift our work days all the time. So
Yeah.
when we're doing stuff
Yeah.
like that, where it's like on the Monday we start at 7 a.m., and on Friday we're starting at 7 p.m. and having to be fully functional for that entire night. So
Yeah, and you don't. I went through it in the summer as well when I was script coordinating on that Lionsgate feature, and we did multiple nights and for these big battles, fight sequences. And the thing about that was, if you're shooting in Vancouver in the summer, you don't really get a night. Like you at that point when we were shooting, it was like 6 hours of darkness.
yeah.
It would get dark around 9:30 or 10, and it would start to, get light again at 4 in the morning. And so many times it just got too light and it was like, okay, we're done. Everybody go home. Yeah, it's an interesting, you do end up in this fugue state around like 2, 3 in the morning. And if you do that multiple times, it's like, whoa.
And producing the film was create a bit of an interesting thing because from our perspective, like that didn't a lot of the times the conversations we were having with sort of like financiers and things like that were happening during the day.
Yeah.
So we might get home at 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and then get 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and then get up, do a phone call, and then go right back to bed or something like that, just to get
Yeah.
ready for the evening. And so
Yeah.
nothing is normal for that period of time. I've been in this industry now for almost just under 20 years, and I've had to do that ever since I started. Like it's not a new phenomenon for me, but when I talk to people who haven't gone through that, they're always shattered that that we're actually all able to function this way. And I think, well, we're just that's I think that speaks to the adaptability of people in the film industry, that we just learn how to do this kind of rotating or adjusting shift work
Yeah,
throughout our
there's really
careers.
like nothing glamorous about production work. I mean, the hours are insane. Often 14, 15, 16 hours a day. If you could take all of the work that you have to do that day in total, and yeah, any hour of the day, any location that's needed for the story. And like we had Amber Ripley on last season, whose film All Night Wrong shot like 4 weeks of nights. The entire
Yeah,
movie was at
the
night.
entire
I
movie.
think
Yeah.
that they were all ready to kill each other by the end of it, I'm sure. But that's just, it's tough. So in terms of producing this movie, I mean, actually I meant to ask you too, like what's the story? What's the genre? What can you tell us about the
It's a crime thriller with a whole bunch of con jobs in it. Without
okay.
getting too much into it, because if I say too much about very specific things,
Sure.
it will reveal too much. But what I can say is that the idea behind it is that there's basically this a guy and a girl meet through a dating app, and that's kind of how the story progresses, and then it turns into a lot of events and moments happen from that point on, as to
Sure. But
who's
you
doing
so a
what to
crime thriller. Okay.
crime thriller. Yeah.
So to me, my mind immediately says that you have multiple locations. Did you
Yes, for
have a
sure.
lot of locations in this movie?
Yes, we did. We had multiple locations. We had one kind of main location that was like the guy's house, which was
Okay.
where he lived, and we were there for 4 or 5 days, and then everything else was a new location.
And now, in terms of the triumphs and the challenges of making this movie, what were some of the difficult things that you go through, and experience, and what are some things that you learned in making this film?
It's really interesting just having been involved on this from the producing standpoint, because we had so many day call crew members. And I mean, this is a little bit of inside baseball on some things, but it's like this idea of having, we had sort of our key crew, but we had a lot of people coming in and out of working. So we'd have people working for
Mhm.
a day here and there, a couple of days here and there, and so on, and then not working at all for the rest of the shoot. And we only know this because we were dealing with obviously payroll and things like that. And it's just like we had to onboard so many people, which is what made it feel less like an indie film and more like a studio production, where suddenly by the end you're like, oh, we only really have a crew size of about 40, 50 people total, which is small for a movie. Not like micro small, but it's
Yeah,
small. It's what we call small level. But we only have like 30 or 40 crew on set at any given point, but we had so many different people, like just in and amongst the ranks. So like you'd show up every day and you'd be like, oh, there's a new person, this person's replacing this person's replacing this person. And I think it was because we were just getting into that state of time where some of the TV shows like Shogun and all these other shows were starting to ramp up, and so crew were starting to bounce back and forth. So it was interesting to try to keep the dynamic of the show working. A lot of
also for
decisions.
context, a lot of these bigger shows do pay more, right? And so this is a
Right.
problem in the industry in general, is that
Huge.
you could go work on a huge studio movie and make X per week, and you can do the exact same job on an indie and you're going to be making a third of that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people end up taking the bigger show, and sometimes they jump shows, which isn't good to do. But obviously in your case, it just seems like there's a lot of just availability issues, and people just were filling gaps and trying to just make that work, right?
And in fairness to crews and so on, I always think to myself, well, a television show is going to offer you 6 to 8 months of work.
Yeah.
At the most, you on this show you're going to get 3-4 weeks of work, and so you can't ever really fault people for making those decisions, as long as, and I always say this with all with everybody, I'm like, if you need to leave for whatever reason, I think that everybody has to be responsible for their own replacements.
Yeah.
You can't drop that on people, on someone to go and find your replacement for you. It's like, no, like if you've made that commitment to the show, and that opportunity comes that you're like, look, I can't justify not going to this other show, then I think you have to, it's incumbent upon you to find someone to step in and to help
Find somebody
transition.
that you can recommend that
Yeah.
is just as good,
That,
if not better than you.
that
Yeah.
would represent you on the set. And
Yeah.
it's always funny
Yeah.
because that happens all the time. Like, again, this is not new information. This happens all the time. And if you're not prepared for that in indie film, then that's one of the bigger lessons in all of this is that like you're doing your film. We'll talk about your film, but like on a film that we are very much like deeply ingrained in. For us, this is the most important thing in our lives for the next 3 months. But for every other person who's working on the crew, it's everything from a paycheck to a credit, like to a work day that they're using to get union creds or whatever it is to get days on
Yeah.
set. So everybody has their own self-interest in terms of working on a crew. It is up to the people for whom it is our livelihood for the next 2 months. It is like the most important to find ways to bring that, to coalesce and bring that together, and to make sure that that's a feature, not a bug. Like, that's not a problem. And you have to
Yeah.
build your plan around the idea that, hey, as long as we have the key creatives sticking with it for this period of time, the rest of the people can be a bit interchangeable as needed. You can have more people, and you need that anyway, because like, your grip, your LX, your art department, and so on, all of them on certain days need more people. So you're always going to
Yeah.
be bringing in extra people, and then you're going to be trimming down. And that's one of the things as a producer you start to see really quickly is you start to have to, you manage the plan from the beginning, but then you have to start looking at the day to day and looking for, okay, are we over crewed right now, or are we under crewed? And each day you're looking at that, and you're almost making adjustments in the moment of saying, we
Yeah.
have too few people, we have too many people right now. Like, we're paying for too many people to stand around and do nothing. So we have to start trimming that back, and you realize you've got too few people, and now you have to bring those up for certain days. And so
Yeah.
that's what producing day to day becomes, is just looking at every day as, are we getting maximum value? Because the worst thing you can do is to spend a day or two on set and see people standing around doing nothing. But then the flip side of that is, you have to, even though you see people standing around doing nothing, is understanding what the teams are doing and what their needs are. And I think as a producer, you need to be on top of, they're standing around because they've just spent the last 2 hours building a rig, and they're just taking a short break for a half hour and then getting back to it, or do we legitimately have too many people? And
Yeah,
it
and it's
sounds
it's a
bad.
dialogue between you and the department head as well. If the department head is saying, "Look, I need I need one more grip and LX for tomorrow. It's a big day. We have to tent off the windows." There's like an argument to be made that, like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense, that we can save some time if we just bring in a couple extra bodies for this one day. But then
Yeah.
sometimes they end up asking for too much, and then it's like, no, actually you guys were fine without that. We can make that work. And so it is just, it's this fluid problem. That's the length of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're doing in producing a film is you're putting out fires on a daily basis, and you don't have to reconcile those fires until you wrap. Like, you sort of like, you're just making these adjustments, and then you start to, you don't have time to kind of look at the full picture each and every single day, because sometimes you just have to be like fixing it in the moment.
Overall, how did you feel that the movie went for you? Was it was success? It was a good learning experience? Are you proud of the work? How do you feel coming out of this?
I feel really good. I mean, you coming from a different perspective of not being in the creative side of things as much. Like I would say most of my time and most of our time in that producing sort of sphere was spent on logistics and not so much on the creative side. So it's sort of, as a producer, you know what we're shooting, you know what we're filming, you know what parts of the story we're involved in, but how it's going in terms of whether performances are good or whether those little things are so much
Yeah.
not out of your brain at all, and you're just trying to figure out, is there something that can be done logistically to make this, to smooth this over. But oftentimes you're not close enough to the moment to moment action to actually know,
Yeah.
and to be fair, that's probably not what your job is as a producer. Your job is not necessarily to know as I say, it's like you don't need to necessarily know what's going on with every single person on set. You just need to know, are things running smoothly? And because they're rarely running smoothly, what are the things you can do to help make it run smoothly? What are the things that you can do to where are the holes that you can plug? And we found ourselves doing everything from arranging for equipment repairs and pickups, and I mean, even one time where we needed, one of those late nights where we needed some extra food for people, because we just to keep some people going. So I literally drove to an all night diner and got a bunch of takeout for people at the lot,
Yeah.
with an hour and a half to go until wrap, because we were wrapping things up, and as you're wrapping things up, food's being put away and so on. But we realized we had 2 more hours of like people actually wrapping the gear, so they were going to be, it was going to be 4 o'clock in the morning, and nobody was going to have anything to eat for a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's ultimately what it is, right? Like, what does a producer do? It's like whatever it takes
Yeah,
to get the movie done. Yeah,
yeah.
especially in the indie world, you're doing everything.
We had infrastructure in place. We had a production office. We had Our production office was in Vancouver though, and most of our shooting was done out in the valley. And so for those who aren't familiar with BC, it's like our production office would be like an hour away from set usually. So you spend time going back and forth, and as a producer, you're sometimes in the production office, you're sometimes on set. There's an hour or two in between from getting to production office to set, and vice versa, where you're a little bit out of touch with things sometimes, but your only touch point is through whatever phone communication is coming in, which is interesting, because you still feel very much involved, but you feel like you've got a layer of detachment from everything that's happening.
So it sounds like overall, that's great. When does the movie come out?
In Latin America, there will be some kind of a premiere, but I'm not entirely sure when that is yet. We haven't been told when the dates are going to be, and I'm not sure what about a Canadian screening yet. I don't know if there will be one. I don't know where it's going to come in Canada. We might not get a Canadian for quite a while, like it might be in a second window or something, only
Okay.
because it's a Spanish language film, and it's not being picked up as a Canadian film, even though it was filmed in Canada. So we have to kind of wait for a broadcaster who wants to pick it up, or a streaming service that wants to pick it up, if Amazon wants to put it on their Canadian platform or not. This isn't always a thing. Like I've worked on several movies for that have gone onto Amazon Prime in the States that still don't have release dates in Canada yet.
Yeah, the territory issue gets in the way of that. Sometimes the because the US is carved out separately to Canada versus the rest of the world as well in terms of
Yeah, yeah.
structures.
Everything
Yeah.
everything is sold piecemeal,
Yeah.
which is probably something to dive into with a person who's an expert in the independent film distribution space. But all those territories have value to them, right? Like there's certain everything has a dollar value attached to it, and so you're always trying to maximize how much money you're going to get with each and every single location. And that's the responsibility of the film and the producers, is to try to maximize the value of the film by selling off those territories for the most dollars you can get for them, and not just giving them away. So that was, I mean, in a nutshell, it was a very good experience to be involved in the producing side of a multi-million-dollar movie. The thing with movies is movies are very magical in that you really can make an area look like another country. I mean, I think we did a really good job of making the Lower Mainland look like Argentina and Patagonia and the areas where the film is supposed to take place. Like we've done I think, a really admirable job of doing that, and it's a credit to sort of locations and to everything else for having put that together, and the director for sort of being able to figure out kind of how to shoot it in a way that didn't give up where we actually were. That's the story of what my last year has been. So I've sort of finished a film, and I'm getting ready to start a new one. In that process, when we finished on Off the Lot season 1, you were about to start going into pre-production on Remnant. I
Yeah.
think you were maybe a few weeks away from getting started because you had an intention of filming in the fall. That
Yeah.
so let's start there. So what happened? What
Sure.
happened then, and then let's take that to kind of where we're at this moment.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, when we finished, it was all very exciting. This would have been like mid-August, and we had raised $1 million. We had these two verbal commitments from investors, and we were greenlit. We were ready to go. And then the most cliche thing imaginable happened when it comes to indie film. One of the investors pulled out right when it came time to collect the money, and it was awful. It was really devastating, because this was now like early September, and we were supposed to be going to camera in October. And not only that, there's just so much that has to get done before you actually even begin pre-production, especially on an indie, in terms of tax credit paperwork, national bank setup, because we're dealing with the National Bank of Canada for accounts. And all of this stuff had to happen. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of money wasn't going to come forward. So, to our other investors' credit, these guys are incredible. They weren't phased at all. They basically were like, well, that's their loss. And we just rolled up our sleeves and we figured out another way to make this movie happen. And it took a couple more months, and we decided to push the movie as well. But we worked really hard in terms of approaching other people, figuring out other ways to just make the financing work for like what we had. And our investors were able to put in a little bit more money. So that helped. And so, long story short, in November, we got the official okay from these investors. They were happy to put in a little bit more. And by beginning of December, the first tranche of money came in, and yeah, the paperwork was signed, and we're good to go. So I'm happy to announce that Remnant is officially greenlit, and the movie is actually happening this time. And not only that, we are now in pre-production. Well, this is the last week of soft prep. We go into pre-production official prep on Monday, January 12th, and we start shooting February 3rd. We're shooting for 18 days here in Vancouver, outside the zone. But yeah, we're crewing, we're casting, everything's in the works right now. So it's very exciting, very busy. But I'm over the moon about how things are coming together.
I had a quick question about the so did any has anything changed since August in terms of like has the budget changed, has the script changed, did you do anything to meet your investors at a certain level, or has everything been able to stay the same?
Yeah, we had to make some adjustments to the budget. We had to just cut some things down, and still work within our means. At the same time, we still have a budget that allows us to make the film at a top tier, top shelf level. And what I mean by that too is, like, I still get to keep my B cam, and I think that it's really important on a movie like this to be able to shoot with two cameras and just have that extra footage and have those extra shots and move quickly. And even sometimes, if you're only using one camera in a scene, have B cam already setting up the next scene in the other room, so that you can maximize your time. Because we just don't have enough days like a Hollywood production would. If this was a Hollywood film, we would probably have between 30 and 40 days to shoot it. But we have 18. So how do I get the most amount of footage in 18 days? Well, I have two cameras. And then I can actually get more footage and shoot scenes faster and get everything done. So it's still going to look great. And the team that I have, I mean, this is just because of my relationship and a couple other people on board, like their relationships with people in the industry, with crew members in the industry. But our department heads are out of this world. I mean, their resumes range from Deadpool or Wolverine and Deadpool and Tron Ares to John Wick, to like all sorts of things. So we have these just awesome people that are excited to just dive in, because they don't have to also deal with the Hollywood studios and the bureaucracy of all of that. It's just like, hey, we are the studio. So if you have a cool idea and we can afford it and it's safe to do, let's do it. And it's a lot of fun that way.
I guess from what your original vision is for the film to now, are there any creative compromises that you're finding yourself in at all? Like, are you having to change how you were going to shoot it? Anything like that?
No, that's a good question. I'm just trying to think. Like, actually, not really. We've had to pull back on some visual effects costs, because that's still a question mark. And can we afford all of the visual effects that we want to do. No, our post-production costs are still kind of in flux right now as far as that goes. But at the same time, I'm not worried about covering those costs right now. It's we have a really good plan of attack as far as visual effects versus practical effects. Everything seems to be within the ballpark of what we hope to achieve. And at the end of the day, this movie is, it's a haunted house exorcism type film, and so 60% of the movie takes place in one location in this massive house that we have, and we're able to make everything work within that. And then we have about 4 days that are on location outside of the house, and those locations are also like coming together. I think at this point we still have 2 locations to find, but
Mm.
going into pre-production with only 2 locations left to find is a pretty good situation to be in. And we know exactly what we're looking for. And then on top of that, casting as well is like essentially done. And I'm very excited about that too.
Yeah, is there anybody you can tell us about? Any cast you can say anything about yet?
I can't talk about cast right now. However, I can say that we have a star attached. The deal is closed. That announcement will be coming very, very soon. And the rest of our other leads are all the offers have gone out. A couple of them have closed already. It's just I think by the end of this week, like it's Monday today that we're recording this, so I think by the end of this week we'll have the rest of our cast locked in place. And then on social media and other sources will start to announce those names. But yeah, we're very excited about who we have. We're very lucky.
I think we'll probably have time over the next few weeks to go get more in depth into kind of those day to day pre production and so on. What have you learned about putting this film together that you didn't expect before you got into prep this time? Like you're obviously like the train's moving.
Yeah,
So what have you learned between August and now that is going to help you, that might have actually been a blessing towards having that delay?
yeah. Well, and just to touch on something that you said, I think it's important to also announce that this is the season 2 premiere of Off the Lot, but how we're going to structure the show for the next few weeks, I guess a couple months, essentially, is a weekly check-in with viewers and listeners to take you through the making of Remnant for week to week. So every week in pre-production and every week of production, Anthony and I will be here talking about what just happened, and I'll be able to talk about the challenges and what's going on in the making of our movie, and to bring you in ground zero essentially of making an indie film, an indie horror film, I should say. To answer your question, it wasn't even just so much about what happened between August and now. It's like all of last year was a learning experience because up until then, I'm a writer in the TV world. I was a short filmmaker and wanting to direct it, but these are all creative positions. What I've learned in the last year, there's just so much about the financing side of indie film, distribution. I'm just learning every day right now more about distribution deals and sales agents and how that whole side of things works. And really, it's about investor psychology, relationships, how to just find the money and how to talk to people and convince them that what you have is a good idea. And it's been crazy. It's been really a wild ride. So ultimately, it comes down to selling. I think in the last year, I just learned how to sell better, and I think that that's a very, very important thing to focus on if you're going out there and trying to create something yourself. And going back to how we started this conversation at the beginning, it's like selling is a part of it. You're not just a writer or a director. You have to sell whatever you're working on. And I don't mean even financially, really. It's emotionally, right? If you're talking to somebody at a cocktail party and you want them excited about your movie or your story, you're selling them on that somehow. And so it's about pitching. It's about being able to talk about it confidently and convince somebody that what you're doing is a great idea. And so
And
that's the big thing.
yeah, and along those lines though, like what are you for what with what you can say, what are your investors like looking for out of this film? Like what's their involvement mean to them? And why, I guess what has drawn them towards this project versus say other opportunities that might be out there. And it's maybe more of a question of like, is there something that you feel is essential for that isn't just about like asking for money, but like what are you offering to investors that you can talk about that makes this an attractive project for them, that keeps them involved, that keeps them.
Well, for one, I mean, they see potential in the property and the franchise and all of that. But that's not really what it's about. These are people who invest in other people, not products. And they've said that multiple times. And these investors, they invest in all sorts of different industries and not even film related, right? And so really to them, it's about an experience. It's about the potential of where this could go. It's about being a part of something different, and they know the risks. Everybody does. Part of that discussion though is like, look, like you get to create something that's timeless, something that 60 years from now is going to be the exact same as it is today once it's done, and you get to see your name on the big screen, and we're going to have the big red carpet premiere, we'll have a fun wrap party, we'll have just a great experience for you, and you can travel the world. If in success, if this movie does well, we can go to the Cannes Film Festival or Toronto Film Festival or Sitges or something like that. And so it's this idea that we really believe in this so much, and we're getting together this amazing group of talented people to work for 18 days, well, plus pre-production, to create something that doesn't exist right now, but 2 months from now, 6 months from now, it will, and your name is going to be on it, and it lasts forever. And so other people are excited about it as well. The script continues to attract. I can't talk about it just at this point. I will down the road, but like we have distributors, multiple distributors that are interested, sales agents, multiple sales agents that are interested in this property, and it's just a very interesting time right now for the movie. And so everybody's excited. That's all I can say.
Do you have your whole do you have all your department heads figured out already?
Yeah, we have our department heads. We're almost fully crewed. It's like everything's sort of underway. Next week will be the real test, because that's when people are officially on the clock. That's when we really get into the nuts and bolts of like, okay, what's the schedule looking like? Well, we have a rough schedule. Let's start getting into the meat of it and the logistics of it.
What has you sort of staying awake at night right now? Coming down the pipeline, like, do you have anything that's kind of like causing you any nerves or anything like that?
I think maybe my one biggest concern, I don't really want to call it a concern because it isn't one yet, but I think just the most important thing that has to be taken care of is just making sure that our art department has enough time and resources to do what they need to in this house, because we are at the house for essentially 14 days out of 18, and the house is completely empty. So there's pros and cons to getting an empty house. One is you don't have to move out the owner's furniture and store it somewhere. You don't have to put the owners up in a hotel, right? All of that's taken care of. They don't exist. You don't have to do it. But the downside is if the house is completely empty, that means you have to bring everything in. I mean, this place doesn't have a refrigerator. It doesn't have anything. And so we have to bring all of the furniture in. We're going to have to paint the house, like the interior of the house. And so dressing it costs a lot of money. And that's where a lot of our resources are going. Now, our production designer is absolutely incredible, and I have full confidence in her and her team to pull this off. But that would be the one sort of thing that's on my mind right now.
Mhm.
Even though we only have 3 weeks of prep officially, we've been prepping this movie I've been prepping this movie at least for 4 or 5 months. And so this week I'm focusing on my floor plans, my blocking director floor plans. I've already done my shot list with my DP. That's going to continue to be tweaked, but a lot of this work has already been done. The heavy lifting has been handled, so I feel pretty good about it all. But I wasn't sleeping for sure in like October, November. That was a very, very difficult time because I wasn't sure if this movie is going to happen or not. Every day was like, are these investors going to come in? Can we find more money? There's other people interested. Because I was talking about, 2 or 3 other investors as well, and they still might come in later. There's still a possibility. So just trying to figure this out, it was awful. I wasn't sleeping at all. But then as soon as everything got signed and the money showed up, all of a sudden it was the best sleep of my life. I swear.
You kind of need, it's kind of an all or nothing thing, isn't it? Like you can't just sit there and say, well, we'll get started and then we'll see if more money comes in, because if you get started without having all the money in, you don't have any guarantees it's going to be finished, and you can end up with you can end up with a half finished film and no way to finish it. And especially if you start losing locations and cast and everybody like that, it's not like a building project necessarily where you could lay the groundwork and then you need a month or two to figure out the
Yeah.
next stage, you can do it that way. You kind of have to have everything in place all at the same time, and then it's go.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, that bank account that you have that looks like it more money than you've ever seen in your life in a bank account, all of a
Yeah.
sudden goes from this down to zero very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, you really have to be sure that you can complete the movie because there are too many risks, especially in terms of indie financing and, tax credit loans and all of that, that you want to be sure that you can complete this movie that you're promising to make. Otherwise, it's going to fall back on you. And the last thing you want is to, personally guarantee a loan of hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're not entirely sure that you're going to be able to pull this off. So you have to be, on top of that for sure.
The idea is that you get a loan usually off of the tax credits, because the tax credits aren't going to be coming for a year at the earliest, right? Because you're going to be
Yeah.
filing your taxes, then the tax credits come in, just like any industry where it's basically a tax return. It's money that you're getting back after you file your taxes after the movie's done.
Yeah.
But in order to cash flow that, you need a loan, and the loan is secured against this tax credit that you're supposed to be getting. But all of that tax credit money is dependent on labor expenses and actually finishing the film and so on and so forth. So there are still some intangibles out there that don't make it a fully secured project, because if you don't finish production, for example, you can't really apply for the tax credits. And if you don't spend the correct amount of money on labor, you're not going to get as much back. So then the people that have loaned you the money against the tax credits, who have been counting on the fact that the estimate that they have is something that they can secure against, needs to all be recognized. And so, like you were saying, that idea of you having to guarantee the loan in
Mhm.
some way is a little bit stressful, because it is putting
Well,
yourself out there.
it's stressful, but at the same time, if like you're not. I'm not taking out a loan personally for the tax
Right.
credits. The company is, but I do have to personally guarantee it because it's my first movie, and that's just how the bank works in this case. With that said, though, it is collateralized against the tax credit itself. So the only risk is us not finishing the movie.
Right.
But to me, that's not a risk because
Right.
on my laptop in front of me right now, I have an edit suite, I have sound, mixing gear, I have everything. So if push came to shove, I could finish this movie myself if I absolutely had to. Production, not finishing production, that's not going to happen. It would have to take basically the big one would have to hit Vancouver or some sort of crazy natural disaster for us not to finish this movie in February. It's still a risk, and you have to be conscious of that. You're signing your life away in some ways, but
Yeah, and that's not meant to say like this is taking any risk that another business or industry isn't taking. Like if you were starting a new business, you'd be taking out a loan necessarily to get things
yeah,
going, and that counts on certain things happening. And most of the time it works out, at least that that the loan is everything is fine and everything happens for a reason. And like you said, I think that there's a confidence factor in what you're doing that you and I both probably have, because we've both been involved in the feature film. We've both been involved in this industry for so long. And also we both have had experience working in indie film and in studio film, and with the people that we know, that the idea of the film not actually completing is almost laughable, because it
yeah,
feels like I've said the same thing on numerous occasions, where I say, look, I have no doubt in my ability to finish the film. The quality of the film is what I'm working on right now. Like how to make it as good as possible is the part that I want to focus on. And I'm sure you're thinking the same thing, is like you want to
yeah,
focus on making this the best movie you can possibly make, knowing that that the clock is now ticking on getting on getting through production. Like you have 2 months now to go from here to the end of
yeah,
production to get the best possible project in the can. Whether or not it finishes or not is irrelevant. That's going to happen. So from a money standpoint, that part's taken care of. It's now a matter of focusing on quality and making a film that's going to actually stand out in a positive way. And whether that's build an audience for your career or build an audience that turns this film into a huge success, that's the part now that you have to spend your time on, you have to spend your energy on. And hopefully that's where you're able to focus for at least this next level of pre-production.
it really comes down to hiring the right people. That's the
Yes.
safety net. That's that peace of mind that I now have where I get to sleep at night. And it's still my, 15, I'm still putting in, 14 or 15 hours a day, prepping this movie. But I do get to sleep well at night. And that's because I have a really good group of people that I'm working with. And we brought on this amazing producer, Mike Johnston, who we had on the podcast actually
Yeah.
earlier. And Mike is producing the film with us, and phenomenal. Just as soon as Mike came aboard, all of these things just started to get done. And, it's been a dream. Think like that for like every department head. I'm so lucky in this position right now to be able to do what I do and work with these people. Let's hope it continues like this. We're still 4 weeks out from shooting, and it's not going to be easy. But I hope it's going to be fun. And I think there will be a lot of like great learning experiences. I mean, this is my first feature film, but as a director, it's not my first feature film, right? Like I've worked on many things before, and just like you, like we pull from all of the experience that we've had, and in this new position, I'm hoping that I can do a great job, and I know I will. We just have to go through it.
Yeah, that's what I think Tarantino said. You don't have to know how to set up a light, but you have to know how to communicate what your intentions are to your DP and
Yeah,
your gaffer.
yeah,
And they're the ones who are going to make it look pretty. You're there to make it look. You're there to tell them what you want it to, how you want the it to feel, and
yeah,
let them figure out the details. And same thing with your
exactly.
production designer and with your costumes and your cast, right? Like you're
Yeah,
casting the people that you think are going to bring the vision that you have to light, but they're human beings, and they're gonna bring their piece to it, their expertise.
yeah. And isn't that the fun part about what we do? Like, and because when you're dealing with a Hollywood studio, they know that they're going to spend X amount of money, and then they will get a movie, and they know how the process works. And as painful as it is, working with a studio and the bureaucracy and all of that, they understand the business of it. But when you're talking to a private investor who is used to, well, if I put in this much money, like what's the process? What's my return? And can't you just calculate that based on all this industry information? But at the end of the day, you know, at the very, very basic level, what we're doing is we're trying to quantify something that is unquantifiable, which is basically it's magic. We're capturing magic. When we hit the record button, we don't know what we're going to get. That's what happens, right? And so you do all of this prep work, and you get everybody together with a single vision, and then you hit record, and that's what you end up with. And you do that in our case, for 18 days in a row, and then that's the film. And that's the footage that we have. And then we have to basically put it together at that point. And there's more magic in the editing room of what you're able to achieve with visual effects and music and color and editing. But it's just, you don't actually know what you're going to end up with until it's done. And so
Yeah.
for an investor who's used to, well, if I just buy this much product and create this much product, I can expect this many sales, in this market. Film is just different that way.
It's not a demand driven industry where you're not sitting there thinking to yourself, well, if there's more demand for this film, then we can charge higher ticket prices or higher rental prices on the film. It's like, no, like the film is the film, and now it's a matter of how many eyeballs are going to go and watch it. And that's a question of the ability to bring something that people want to talk about, and to put something together that people are going to talk about afterwards. And that's
Yeah.
where the investors are looking for, is they want something. That's where the value in it is. But like you said, you're not inventing anything new. You're not inventing a new camera. The
Yeah.
camera is
Yeah.
there.
We're
You're not
not, we're not
inventing.
James Cameron over here.
Right. Yeah. 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 You're not coming to this with like a $2 billion Avatar movie, or
Yeah.
like a new technology that you're trying to explore. You're using the technology and creating an art piece. The paintbrushes are the same. It's just a matter of now what you're actually painting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I'm in a position where I feel really lucky, because last season we interviewed so many great filmmakers and talked about what they did to make their movies. And now I'm in a position where I get to take some of what they said and put it into practice, and really think about how we're approaching this movie, and how we're trying to cut through the noise. Because look, we're not the first people to make an indie horror film, and
Right.
certainly not this type of indie horror film. So how do we stay? How do we be bold? How do we cut through the noise? How do we make ourselves known? and it comes down to marketing as well. And so I had a marketing meeting this morning with my team, and that's something that we're going to be focusing on while we are in pre-production, while we're in post, or in production and in post, and hopefully it helps. I don't know, but we have to get the word out. This podcast, where I thought it'd be a lot of fun to take people through the process of making this film. On that note, and we'll put all this in the show notes, but I have the newsletter, the weekly newsletter, which also touches on the weekly process of making this film. It's called The Film Founder on Substack. And then you can follow me on Instagram, specifically Ken_Kabatoff, because I'll be posting a lot more about Remnant and the making of that.
So I'm going to ask you two questions. The first one is, what's the logline of the film?
The logline for Remnant is: 10 years ago, Anna's father disappeared, a fugitive wanted for mass murder. 2 days ago, her estranged mother mysteriously died. But when Anna inherits her childhood home, a malicious, demonic presence forces her to confront the terrifying truth of her family legacy. And this is very loosely inspired by my dark, checkered family history in this country, where for a while, my family was actually known to be a terrorist group in this country. And that's something I've talked about before. And so there's this like dark cloud that's been over our family and over our community for years. And it's something that I've had to learn to accept. And so thematically, this film's really about learning to accept your history and your background, and use that in order to move on. And tonally, the movie is very much in the vein of like Insidious, The Conjuring, Sinister. It's a total horror thrill ride.
Amazing. And you'll have all the info as to where people can find out more about the film in the show notes. What is going to make this film? This might be the tricky one. What is going to make this film different from all of those other films?
Honestly, the script is just absolutely fantastic. Thematically, it speaks to so many people. Our cast is phenomenal. The look of this movie, it's we're going to be firing on all cylinders across the board. But ultimately, it comes down to story and to script. And I say that because right now, to make something that looks like a Hollywood film, anybody can do that. Like, the production value has been democratized. Anybody can go out there and get an Alexa 35. So what separates films from each other at this point? It comes down back to storytelling, to the script. And I think we have an absolutely phenomenal script written by Christopher Nash, my longtime collaborator.
Fantastic. Well, we'll tune back in next week and see how the first week of pre-production went.
Yeah, good. I can't wait. Let's keep doing this. Thanks, Anthony. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Ken.